Uh-oh. Oh, just a second.
And the scribe erased Yehovah. This is momentous.
No, this is momentous.
This is a very big deal.
Welcome to Hebrew Gospel Pearls. We are in what we're calling the Biblical Beatitudes series. We're actually in episode 15. We have decided we're going to take our time and go through each of the what's called traditional Beatitudes one at a time. And I'm convinced if you hang in here with us, you are going to truly be blessed/happy. We are at Nehemiah, Matthew chapter 5, verse 4. And before you get started, I want to say something. You know,
Yes.
I read the English and it seems so simple. You just read the English. It's simple. You can help with your own translation. You can come up with your own understanding. And then if I happen to open up Howard's Hebrew, I see something different. So I'd like to read the English to start. Then I want you to do what you've been doing, which is, let me just stop and say this, folks. Nehemiah gave us a great gift in 13. He actually did a Hebrew translation where he read in Hebrew from the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew and then did an English translation. We make that available to you in the 13th episode. But in each episode, we're going to go to each of these Beatitudes again, and you're going to give us the translation. But first, I want to read the English, if it's okay.
Sure.
Matthew chapter 5, verse 4. NASB, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. What else do I need to understand? I know what mourning is. I know what comfort is. Let's move on, right, Nehemiah? It's over. That's it.
I don't know. What are they mourning about?
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, it really begs the question.
Yeah.
And then look, there's a parallel here, Luke 6:21, which is the so-called Sermon on the Plain. And there he says, blessed are you that weep now, for you shall laugh. And this is considered the parallel. Now, which one of these did he say? And maybe he said both, right?
Yes.
In other words, maybe on one occasion on a hill, he said, blessed are those who mourn. And on a plain, he said, blessed are those who weep now, for you shall laugh. And they're both true. It's possible, right? Or maybe he said something in between and it was just recorded differently by two different people, right? I mean, there's different ways of looking at it. So when we come to the Hebrew, it's a little bit more complicated.
Yes.
So Hebrew Matthew survives on this verse in 20 different manuscripts. Let me see if that's correct. You know what? It survives in this section on 20 different manuscripts, but this specific verse is actually, am I right, only in 19? Right. Because manuscript G doesn't have this verse at all. Manuscript G, which I call part of group, I broke them up into two groups, A and B, and really largely based on this verse, on this whole passage, but really this verse. So let's just remind the audience what we talked about in episode, I think 13, that group A of the Hebrew Matthew manuscripts has verse 2 followed by verse 3, which, of course it's verse 3 is followed by verse 2. Not of course.
Yeah.
Which is then followed by verse 5, which is then followed by verse 4, which is then followed by verse 8.
Yes.
Now, group B also has verses 2 and 8. But between verses 2 and 8, it only has verse 4. It doesn't have verses 3 and 5. Among those, manuscript G is also missing verse 4. So it goes from verse 2 to verse 8. Now, why are these verses missing? And there's obviously two possibilities. One possibility is that we have a scribal error in the Hebrew in the manuscripts where it's missing. And what do I mean by a scribal error? A scribe is copying and he's looking back and forth he has two texts. He has the source he's copying from, the first manuscript, the source manuscript, and the second manuscript he has that he's copying from. And he's constantly looking back and forth. And every time he looks back and forth, he stores in his memory 2 or 3 words. And he even may say those words out loud, right? So let's say he's copying verse 1. He says, he looks in the source, Vayhi achrei zeh, and he writes, Vayhi achrei zeh. Ba'etahi. Vayar hachavurot, and he looks to the one where he's copying and he writes Vayar hachavurot. So he stores a few words in his memory. There are traditions where it talks about how the scribes would actually say these words out loud. There's other traditions. For example, in the Greek world, it's supposedly they have this description where one scribe would read it out loud and the second scribe would write. We don't really have evidence of that in the Jewish world. They would be looking back and forth, and probably for most Greek manuscripts as well. So here's what happens. When he looks back to his source, sometimes what happens is he looks to the wrong place. How does he look to the wrong place? So let's say you have several words in a series of verses that are identical.
Mm-hmm.
And so he looks, and here we have a beautiful example. How many verses here do we have that begin with the word ashrei? Right? So we have, and that's called a homoio arcton. Homoio is the Greek word for similar.
Mm-hmm.
Homoio arcton means the similar beginning.
Yes.
So he's a series of verses with a similar beginning. 1, 2, I'm talking just in the Hebrew, right?
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3,
Mm-hmm.
4, 5, 6, and then you could say maybe 7 because it's a similar beginning. So 7 verses.
Yes.
And finally we have so verse 12 doesn't begin with ashrei.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 7 verses in the Hebrew version of group B, where it begins with the same beginning, ashrei, ashrei, ashrei.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have in the Greek, we have 9 verses that begin with the same beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible the scribe, he's looking back and forth, and he comes to the end of the verse, and he looks for the next verse, which begins with ashrei.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of copying the verse he wanted to copy, he copied the next verse.
Mm-hmm.
That's homoio arcton. Now, homoio arcton, the similar beginning, can cause 2 different types of errors.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, by the way, I'm giving you guys now a crash course into textual criticism. It can cause the error of haplography. Haplography, think of the word half. Sounds like half. Haplography. Haplography is where I have 2 elements. 2 verses, and they both begin ashrei. So let's say for group A, I have verses 2, 3, 5, 4, and 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now the scribe who created group B, and this is one way that it might have happened. He's copying verse 2. Okay, great. He's then looking for the verse that begins with ashrei. And instead of going to verses 3 and 5, he jumps to verse 4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why? Because he remembered the next word was ashrei,
Mm-hmm.
and he looks back at his source and he copies the word ashrei.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So haplography is I've lost a verse. You also have datography. Datography, think of the word ditto.
Mm-hmm.
Datography is where I copy the same thing twice. Now, I want to show you something, as I wasn't even planning on doing this, but since I'm giving the crash course in textual criticism, I'm going to show you an example of datography in the Tanakh. And I was just looking at this yesterday.
Oh, this is good. Hey, this is the good stuff, you guys.
This is really good stuff. You're not going to even believe this, Keith.
Yeah, okay.
Why is this such good stuff? I'm going to show you in a minute. So here we have in 1 Samuel,
Mm-hmm.
let me pull it up. In 1 Samuel, you have a series of verses, and I'm actually to ask you to read it in English.
1 second.
And then the people, just listen for the repeated words, because the repeated words, those are the words that will cause our homoio.
Mm-hmm.
Homoio is the similar. You have the similar beginning called homoio arcton, and homoio televton is the similar ending. We're not dealing here with homoio televton. So the similar beginning. Guys, this is really foundational stuff because there's so many things in the Tanakh and in the New Testament that kind of don't make sense until you're aware of this type of problem.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see scholars say, well, some manuscripts read, and you're like, well, why do they read that way?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Well, now you know. Now you'll know why. So let's start in 1 Samuel 16, verse 8.
Okay. Verse 8. Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel, and he said, neither has Yehovah chosen this one. Next, Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, neither has Yehovah chosen this one. Then Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to Jesse, Yehovah has not chosen these. Continue.
All right, well, let's stop there for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So we had 2 verses 9 and 10,
Mm-hmm.
and they both begin with the same 2 words, Vaya'aver Yishai, and Yishai, or Jesse, caused to pass before, or pass over. And then the following word begins with the same letter, Shammah, Vayaver Yishai Shammah, and Jesse caused to pass there, or Vayaver Yishai Shivat, and Jesse caused to pass 7.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 2 verses that begin with the same exact 2 words, and then the third word has the same letter. So this is rife for homoio arcton, the similar beginning. If we looked in all the manuscripts of the Tanakh, I would be shocked if we didn't find a manuscript somewhere where this mistake occurred. And lo and behold,
No, wait, no.
I was
You found one?
a year and a half ago, I was in Geneva, Switzerland, where I had the very blessed opportunity to examine one of the 6 major manuscripts of the Tanakh. And the manuscript is called Sassoon 1053. And I was examining Sassoon 1053 for this exact verse. And what do I find? I find homoio arcton, not of haplography, where there's 2 verses and one was lost, but datography, where there's 2 verses and one was copied a second time. So let me show this to you, okay?
Okay. Excellent. Hey, are you going to show our folks? Are you going to find
I'm going
a
to
way
show it. I'm going to share the screen here.
While he's looking, stop just for a second. Now listen, guys, listen to this now. I don't know where you folks are at in terms of the significance of studying scripture, but we're studying with a guy who doesn't even have this planned in his head when we start this thing. And it just comes to him. He says, and not only does he take us to the verse, he says, I've seen the manuscript.
I held it in my hands, Keith. I actually did images of it with a microscope that I'll share one day. No.
Okay, awesome.
It's pretty cool stuff. Okay, this is page 259 of Sassoon 1053. And here you can see something happened. What happened? So somebody erased the corrector, and it seems it's the original scribe. Why do I say it's the original scribe? Because what the scribe would do is he would write the consonants, and he would come then, either he or a second scribe would come and write the vowels and accents. And you can see whoever erased this never wrote the vowels and accents. The vowels and accents were never added. I can see that particularly, for example, in this word. And what did he do? He didn't erase the whole word. He erased the bottom half of the word. Why did he do that? Because spaces in the Hebrew manuscripts have significance. If there's a space of an entire line or a half a line or part of a line, a significant size space, that means this is the end of a thought, and now here's a new thought. So what they would often do is if they need to erase something, is they would only erase the bottom half of the letters to say, hey, this is erased. They would also not put in accents and vowels. But another way they would do it is they would erase the bottom half, and erasing the bottom half told you, okay, don't read these words. Well, you can't even read them. They're hard to read. These words are erased, but this is not a space that was intended. This is a space caused by erasure. So how do I know this is erased? So I held it in my hands, and I could see he scratched off parts of the parchment here on these bottom 3 lines. And what exactly happened? So we had the case of homoio arcton, which was the similar beginning. Remember, just like in Matthew 5, we have a series of verses that all begin ashrei, ashrei, ashrei. In the Greek, it's a parallel word. And here he has vaya'aver Yishai, and Yishai caused to pass. And here I could see the remnants, the top half of the words, vaya'aver Yishai. So he copied the verse, and then when he got to the end of the verse, which was here, he copied the verse a second time. And he actually ended up erasing the first 2 words of the second instance and then filled them in. He went back because he realized, I shouldn't have erased the bottom half of these 2 words. These 2 words we need.
Wait.
So he had to rewrite the bottom half of the words Vayevel Yishai. And then here in the next column, you could see at the top of the column is the full verse. Vayevel Yishai Shama, Vayomer Gam Bazeh Lo Bachal Yehovah. Now here's the really cool thing, Keith. What are the last 3 words of the verse? Lo, not, Bachal, he chose, Yehovah, meaning Yehovah did not choose. Okay, so, and look, the next verse begins Vaya'aver, which is what Vayaver Yishai Shivat. Right? So instead of jumping to the second verse, he copied the first verse twice. Okay, that's datography from the word ditto, as opposed to haplography, which is from the word half, where we lose half of it. Or connect it with the word half. That reminds me of that. Okay, so here's the beautiful thing. What were the last 3 words of the verse that he copied twice? Lo b'chal Yehovah. We actually have a second thing going on here, which is called homoio televton, the similar ending. Okay? Because lo b'chal Yehovah, and the following verse also ends, Lo bachal Yehovah. So this was rife for error, right? He's looking back and forth, and he sees, oh, I just copied Lo bachal Yehovah. Let me now look back and find those words and copy whatever comes after it. And that's what he did. But here's the really, really beautiful thing. So this verse is erased. And I can tell you what it says. I know exactly what it says because he copied the same verse twice. Vayavel Yishai Shama, and this is the top of Shin Mem He. Vayomer, and he said, Gam Bazeh, also in this, Lo Bachal Yehovah.
Oh, just a second.
And the scribe erased Yehovah. This is momentous.
No, this is momentous.
This is a very big deal. Why is this a very big deal?
Oh, my goodness.
I researched for years a question. Let's back up. I started out, Keith, with the hypothesis. First, I started out with the observation that in the Aleppo Codex, the most important manuscript of the Tanakh, the name is usually written without the full vowels, just like it's written here without the full vowels, by the way. And every once in a while, the scribe put in the full vowels, the full vowel Yehovah, and people said to me, no, Nehemi, it's not possible. If there was you're telling us the scribe made a mistake. And I said, yes, he made a mistake that was right. And I did a study, Keith, called The Mistake That Got It Right.
That got it right. It's epic. It's an epic.
It is epic. So the mistake that got it right. And in that study, I said something to the effect of that I was told, I was told that when the scribes made a mistake with the name in the Aleppo Codex, they never erased a vowel or an accent. And I remember, I don't know if I said it in this study or a different study, I said that this was based on a database that was compiled over years in the 1970s and 80s by scholars who examined the Aleppo Codex directly. And I said something to the effect of, I wish I could see it for myself, that database. Not only have I seen the database for myself, but I actually got to see the Aleppo Codex for myself. And not for 5 minutes like when I was there with Reggie White, but for 9 hours, I got to sit with it and examine it. And what I found within the first probably 15 minutes of studying the database is that what I was told was wrong. Not only did they erase the accents and vowels in the Aleppo Codex, but I found 5 places where they erased the letters. The actual letters. Now, why is that such a big deal? It's such a big deal because there's a rabbinical law based on Deuteronomy 12, 3-4. Can you read those verses, Keith?
Oh, man, I'm a little overwhelmed right now. I can't, I mean...
This is absolutely
Did you plan on doing this? I mean,
No, I didn't. Let's go back. Let's read Deuteronomy 12, 3-4.
Okay, hold on here. Oh,
this is completely unplanned.
This is beautiful.
12. But this is important, and it'll help us with Hebrew Matthew.
Absolutely.
It'll help us immensely. Look, let me tell you why... read those verses, and then remind me to tell you why this is such an important manuscript.
Okay,
so 10:53.
Tell me again to get Deuteronomy 12, 3 and 4.
3 and 4.
Reading from the NASB.
And it's talking about destroying the high places of the pagans, the nations where you are coming to inherit their land in verse 2, verse 3.
Okay, and you shall tear down their altars and smash their sacred pillars and burn their asherim and with fire, and you shall cut down the engraved images of their gods, and you shall obliterate their name from that place. You shall not act like this toward Yehovah your God.
And it literally says you shall not do so to Yehovah your God.
Yes.
Now, what does it mean in the context? In the context, it means destroy the sacred places of the pagans. And in the context, it means don't worship God the way they worship their gods. They worship gods with sacred pillars. They worship gods with high places. They worship gods with altars to Baal. Don't worship Yehovah the way they worship their gods. Leviticus 17 says if you bring a sacrifice and it's not to the entrance of the tent of meeting, it's considered like murder. It says blood shall be reckoned to that person. So you shall not do so to the Lord your God, or to Yehovah your God, literally, means don't worship their gods the way that don't worship your God the way that they worship their gods. That's what it means in the context. Okay. The rabbis come along and they do something that they often do. They take it out of context and they say, what are we commanded to do? To erase the name of the pagan gods. And therefore it's forbidden to erase the name Yehovah. If you accidentally wrote Yehovah somewhere, it's forbidden to erase it. Now I'm going to show you what they did in Torah scrolls. This is really cool. This is totally off the reservation.
Wait.
I wasn't planning on bringing this, but I'll bring it because it's kind of cool. So they did different things in Torah scrolls. What they would often do if they made a mistake in a Torah scroll is they would, and this is, by the way, another example of homoiarchton, interestingly enough. Beautifully. It's a beautiful example because it's not homoarchton. Homo means the same. It's homoio, the similar beginning. So this is a Torah scroll from the 13th century. And you can see here the scribe copied on the first line. He got to the end of the line in Deuteronomy, and he copied the words, me'odcha ad hayom. And then he got to the next line, and instead of copying the word hazeh, which was the next word, he copied Yehovah. Now, right now, we don't have Yehovah there. We have this blank space. And the blank space has an ink rectangle around it.
Yes.
So his eye jumped. This is called parablepsis. Parablepsis is when the scribe's eye jumped. It jumped from line 2 to line 3. And he copied the word Yehovah here. And immediately he realized it was a mistake. And he put an ink rectangle around it. And then, and this is what it looks like zoomed in, you can see the traces of the ink rectangle. Then he came with a razor and he actually cut it out. So they did that in Torah scrolls. They couldn't do that in codexes. Why couldn't you tell me why couldn't they do it in codexes?
Two sides of the paper.
That's right. If you cut out the word, you've now cut out a word from the second side that you didn't mean to cut out. So in codexes, what they did is they would often put the ink rectangle around it. But in both the Aleppo Codex and in Sassoon 1053, they erased the name itself. Now, when it comes to Aleppo... Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry, just slow.
Contrary to rabbinical law, according to the rabbis, it's a sin against the Torah to erase even a single letter of God's name. But the scribe of the Aleppo Codex did it.
Permission to just... Nehemiah, you really caught me off guard. Folks, I apologize in advance for this. I know we're supposed to be getting to Hebrew Matthew, but this is important. This is really
extremely important. Yeah.
You're telling me now, we got beat up on some of this regarding what happens to the name. You're telling me, Nehemiah, you never told me this, by the way. In the Aleppo Codex, you found five
instances. So here's what we were told, okay? Or here's what I had argued, that the scribe accidentally put in the vowel, and then I was told he couldn't erase the vowel because he wasn't allowed to. And I said, I wish I could verify that. I verified it. It's not true. If he wanted to erase the accents and the vowels, he could. And I found places where in the Aleppo Codex, it originally had Yehovah with the full vowels, and the scribe erased the cholam. I found a case like that, right? So I have 6 places or 8 places, it depends how you count them, where it has the full vowels. But there's one place where it had the full vowels and he erased the cholam. But it's even bigger than that. Not only did he erase the vowels, he actually erased the consonants in 5 places. But I only have circumstantial evidence in the Aleppo Codex. I have very powerful circumstantial evidence, especially in one of the cases where you can kind of see the outline of the first hay and the second hay. When it comes to Sassoon 1053, it's not circumstantial evidence. I'm going to share it one more time, and then I'm going to tell you why it's so important.
Please.
So here it is on the screen. The bottom of Yud, He, Vav, He was erased, contrary to rabbinical law. So we know 100% this scribe was not a rabbinical Jew. And the same thing of the scribe who wrote at least the consonants of the Aleppo Codex. And you could argue the accents as well, but certainly the consonants. He wrote Yud, He, Vav, He, and he erased the bottom of it. Why is this so important? So this is a codex, a Bible that was written shortly after the Aleppo Codex was written, and it's mentioned in a book list that was found in the Cairo Geniza. The Geniza was this archive of manuscripts from Cairo, and in this archive, it mentions all the books they had in their library, and this is the book of the Jews of they're called the Jews of El Shams, which is the Jews of the Levant, meaning Israel. So the Jews of Israel, the Jerusalemite Jews in Cairo had this book list of their library, and one of them was called The Brother of the Crown. And the brother of the crown, it's been argued, is Sassoon 1053.
Oh my goodness.
And Sassoon 1053 actually mentions it's the earliest reference we have that Ben Asher is the scribe who wrote the Aleppo Codex in Sassoon 1053 itself. And that the scribe who wrote the consonants erased the bottom half of Yud He Vav He. There it is.
Guys, I just want everyone to realize, I mean, I'm sitting here in real time in utter, I'm trying to hold myself together, folks. After I get off this call with Nehemiah, I'll yell and I'll shout and I'll dance because what you have uncovered is the approach that you take, Nehemiah, which is this. You say that you were born in Illinois, but you're really from Missouri.
In my heart.
He's in his heart. He's a show me person, and I'm not going to go much further other than to say this: what you just showed us that you saw changes the game of the argument that has been cast upon you and upon the.
Well, one of the big arguments is they never made mistakes with the name. It's not possible.
Oh my goodness!
I found mistakes,
folks. This is huge. Okay,
I found mistakes that they corrected. I found mistakes they didn't correct, Keith.
And can I say this? Now, this is what I want to say because I know what you're going to end up doing. I know what you're going to end up doing. We'll go too far. But I want to say why this is significant with Hebrew Matthew. Because with Hebrew Matthew, as you were an investigator in Torah scrolls and with the big six and dealing with these codexes and powerful things, you've taken the same approach with the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. You have taken the same approach to actually investigate what is the scribe doing? And in Hebrew Matthew, chapter 5, verse 4, we see it in a powerful way.
Now, before we get to 5:4, we'll get to that in the plus. I don't think we're going to get to it now. I got to explain these two groups. We have group A and we have group B. And remember, group B, let's see, is it group? Yeah, group B doesn't have verses 3 and 5.
Right.
And so all of this was to explain why it is they don't have verse 3 and 5, and there's two explanations. I didn't even get to the second explanation. The first explanation is that maybe there's an error that the scribe was copying, and it says Ashrei 7 times. 7 verses in a row begin Ashrei, 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 Ashrei. And in the Greek, it's 2 more. Maybe the original Hebrew had all 9 verses, and verses 6 and 7 that we'll get to in a future episode, maybe they were lost by homoio arcton, the similar beginning with haplography, that is, it was lost. Okay, so that's possibility number 1. The verses were lost, that when he saw the word Ashrei, his eye skipped. Instead of copying verse 3, he skipped to what he thought was the next word to copy, but it was verse 4. And then he did it again and copied verse 8 instead of verse 5. Or actually, it's backwards, meaning we have verse 3 followed by verse 5 followed by verse 4. In the group B manuscripts. So that's possibility number 1, that the original Hebrew had all 9 or possibly 7 of these Ashrei verses, of the blessed be verses, Makarioi verses, and that 2 or 4 of them were lost. That's possibility number 1. What's possibility number 2? Possibility number 2 is kind of obvious, is that the group B manuscripts have the original Hebrew Matthew, and that Hebrew Matthew originally was what just didn't have 4 of the verses that the Greek Matthew has. And that somebody came along and said, wait a minute, there's missing verses here. We've got to add them. We've got to add them in from the Greek or from the Latin or whatever they were using, right? And that they translated them from the Latin and the Greek into Hebrew. That's possibility number 2. And what suggests that as a strong possibility? I lean towards that possibility, but I don't know, right? How can I know? I lean towards that possibility because in group B manuscripts, where they do have verses 3 and 5, verse 5 comes before verse 4. And we have this idea in textual criticism. It's a very common thing in the study of manuscripts that originally something is written in the margin, and later another scribe comes along and writes it in the body of the text, and he doesn't exactly know where to put it, so he puts it in the wrong place. In other words, let's imagine this scenario. Originally, Hebrew Matthew has verse 2, verse 4, followed by verse 8. And between verses 2 and 8, there is 1 verse. So verse 3 isn't there, verse 5 isn't there, verse 6 isn't there, and verse 7 isn't there. Maybe that's what the original Hebrew Matthew had. I'm not saying that's what Yeshua said in the Sermon on the Mount. We have the Greek testimony of Matthew, and we have the Greek testimony of Luke chapter 6, right? We have 2 other testimonies. But maybe the original Hebrew Matthew had jumped from verse 2 to verse 4 to verse 8, and maybe that's how it originally was written.
Mm-hmm.
And then a scribe comes along and says, wait a minute, I know there's more in the Sermon on the Mount. I don't remember everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes and he looks in Greek or in whatever he had, and he writes verses 3 and 5 in the margin.
Mm-hmm.
And then in another phase, now phase 3, verse 3 is put where it belongs the next time the manuscript is copied, but doesn't exactly know where to put verse 5, so he puts it after 4. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's scenario number 2. And I really have no way of knowing which of these took place. What's really amazing is what we find in verse 4. Because all the manuscripts, except for manuscript G, have verse 4, but both groups A and group B have verse 4.
Oh, my goodness.
And verse 4 has something that just blew my mind. I'm going to save it for the plus section.
And the reason we have to save it, you guys, and please, we're not playing around here.
No,
we have to give it its time. We have to give it its effort. We have to be able to take that approach. I want to tell folks something. Also, Nehemiah, I did something in preparation for going to the plus section. I called a famous Orthodox rabbi in Israel.
Wow.
And I asked him about the 2 Hebrew words in 5 verse 4 without giving him context. Like I just said, what do these 2 words mean? And I just tell you something, he blessed me. So we're going to go to the plus section. Episode 14 is where we got into 5:3. And that is at Nehemiah's Wall. It is for the folks that are supporters of Nehemiah's Wall. Now we're at 5:4. What we're going to do now is we're going to end the public presentation. If you're not blessed by this, listen, I'm telling you folks right now, you could stop right now and be blessed. But I'm telling you, there's so much more that we're about to go to in 5:4 that if it blows Nehemiah away, it's going to blow everybody away. So what you get to do right now is you go to Biblical Foundations, BFAinternational.com, become a premium member. Once you become a premium member, you have access to 5:4, front page of BFAinternational.com. You just click the Hebrew Gospel Pearls and you'll have access to all of that. Nehemiah, is that enough? I mean, are we giving enough before we...
I just want to say one last thing.
Yes.
What I love so much about the Sassoon 1053 example I shared is that in textual criticism, they tell you all these theories about how errors take place.
Yes.
But they're just theories. Mm-hmm. Here we can see what the scribe did in brown and another shade of brown or black and white, right? In other words, we see what actually happened in as clear as day. And did that happen in Hebrew Matthew? Or did this other thing happen? I mean, we don't know for sure, right? It's one of those 2 possibilities, but it's such a beautiful example that can shed light on so many other things. It really blessed me to be able to see that in Hebrew Matthew and tie that in with what happened in the Tanakh. It's just beautiful things. And I can't wait to share an even more powerful example, in my view, in 5:4 in the plus section.
I mean, I'm just like, I'm a little overwhelmed and excited. So I want to go on. Can you pray for us? And then I'll close.
Yehovah Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, Yehovah our Father in heaven, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to find that I was wrong about the Aleppo Codex, that indeed, when it came to your name and a mistake was made, if they knew about that mistake, the scribes corrected it. And when they didn't correct it, that means they either didn't know about it or they thought it was right. It was right, not how they intended it originally, but in a different way, Yehovah. Yehovah, I am so blessed to have found out and discovered these things. I realize this is no small thing, that few people have had this opportunity. And to give me the opportunity to share that with the world, Yehovah, is such a great honor, such a great blessing. I ask, Yehovah, for all those who seek your name, who want to understand your word, to understand the words spoken 2,000 years ago in Matthew, and whatever words they come to understand, Yehovah, you give them the heart to understand those things and the guidance to walk in your way and your path. Amen.
Yes. And Father, thank you so much for what you have taught me regarding vision, that when you give vision, you also give provision. I want to thank you for the people that have provided for this process to go forward. I want to thank you for every person that's put their hand to the plow, that has helped us. We ask blessing upon them. Now, Father, as we go forward, and we've slowed down in this section, these biblical Beatitudes, so much we can learn, so much we can apply, so much that we can share. We just ask that you would give us grace to continue in excellence. We thank you for all the things that you have done, are doing, and will do. We lift it all up to you in your name. Amen.
Amen.
You have been listening to Hebrew Gospel Pearls with Nehemiah Gordon and Keith Johnson. For a more in-depth study, check out Hebrew Gospel Pearls Plus at nehemiaswall.com and bfainternational.com. Thank you for your support.